Hello and welcome to the Do You Remember podcast, the podcast that takes us back to happier times. Today we're going to take a deep dive back into nostalgia, and I'm joined by someone who's been in the television industry for around a decade, but more importantly than that, he's a good friend of mine. I've known him since 1999. I've known him since school and college, the good old days. I'm joined by Damian Ratcliffe.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm fantastic, thank you very much, and I'm really excited today to be talking about something that me and you, we've got a mutual love for, and that is the TV show Shameless. So, Damien, can you give us like a brief overview of what Shameless was?
Oh, God, it became a lot of things, didn't it? I guess it started off as would you call it a sitcom? It was a sitcom about a family that lived in Manchester, and they were a rough family. You know, the dad was an alcoholic, and he'd got many kids, and he was shagging the neighbour. I mean, it was just, there was all sorts going on in that story. You couldn't really pinpoint it with one description, I don't think, but it was great.
It was, wasn't it? It was kind of like a family of likeable scallies, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think Shameless came at a time, especially for people like us that were brought up in a place like Farnworth. It was quite relatable. It was a show about a dad. I guess the main focus of it was the father, wasn't it? It was Frank Gallagher, who was the alcoholic, never sober, pissed arsehole who he's got all these kids, and you know he's quite feckless. I guess the word would be he's left the eldest daughter to look after the rest of his family, and his wife's done a runner, and he spends all his time down the pub doing drugs, but it was quite funny as well at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've managed to really have a nice blend between kind of that kind of serious and dark topic, but making it really light-hearted and, like I say, making the family still likeable and still, you wanted to see them kind of succeed and you wanted to see them do well, and you didn't really want to see them go through the hard times that they were going through. But you touched on another interesting topic, saying we're both from Farnworth, and for those of you who don't know, Farnworth's quite a rough area, let's say, not the most affluent area.
Just put it into the Urban Dictionary, I guess, and then I think that sums it up perfectly.
Oh, I wonder what it says, actually. I'm quite intrigued myself what it says about Farnworth. I'm guessing it's something not too flattering.
I'm going to find it, actually. But yeah, Shameless, it was very relatable, I guess, for people like us growing up in a place like Farnworth. You know, everybody knew a family like the Gallaghers, which was the name of the family that it sort of revolved around.
Definitely. And yeah, I was sorry to cut you off, but like, to me, I don't know why, but it kind of glamorized that kind of lifestyle. So I don't know how it came across to other people, and maybe you have a completely different opinion. But to me, as a viewer, it glamorized it to a certain extent, and I never, until I saw this, I never saw that kind of lifestyle as well.
Well, there was nothing like Shameless, was there, before? I remember when it came out and just thinking, God, this is, I wouldn't necessarily say groundbreaking at the time, because I think I was a little bit young to use words like that. But actually looking back on it, it was definitely a new genre and well, there was nothing like it before. It was relatable. And
it was.
Everyone knew a family like the Gallaghers. I mean, again, we're both from Farnworth, so we probably shouldn't start naming people, but, you know, I've got a few families that spring to mind straight away, which I'm sure you're aware of as well.
Yeah.
Less like that. Here we go. Urban Dictionary, Farnworth. It's a backwards little ex-mill town near Bolton. Its residents think they're all mafioso-type families when really they are village idiot losers. Farnworth has the skankiest women in the UK. Any Farnworth women whose tattoos are spelt correctly, it has a bit of class. And then, to put it into context, Farnworth people have a dumb backwards accent like "Hey up Chuck" and "Adio Reet." They are so retarded they make the hillbillies on dueling banjos look like college professors. Farnworth is a cesspit, big time. And that's Urban Dictionary's definition of Farnworth.
Tell me you are taking the piss.
Bloody hell, Urban Dictionary. Tell it like it is, why don't you, Christ? I feel attacked.
But no, the Shameless was definitely a show that I could relate to. I'm sure you could relate to, and with the people that we sort of grew up around and people we went to school with, it was definitely something that you sort of thought, yeah, I can definitely see a little bit of Frank Gallagher in you.
Definitely, there's one specific area that I always think of, and it was within walking distance from my house. I'm not going to name the area because I've got some friends who were from there, and they're nice people, but when I watch Shameless, I always think of that area. Even to this day, I always think of that area.
Pardon? Little
I'm
Holton.
not. It's even closer to home than
I'm
that,
just
but I'm
going to
not.
say it. It's Little Holton, isn't it?
I'm not going to go into it, but it's closer to than home than even Little Holton. But yeah. So when was the first time that ever heard about Shameless? Because it came out in around 2004. For a bit of context, we were both like 15, 16 at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I used to watch a lot of TV growing up. There wasn't much to do unless you was on the streets drinking cider in Falmouth. But yeah, I just remember. I think I remember seeing the advert, and the one thing that sticks in my mind was I think it was Veronica, the neighbour that lived next door, played by
Sure.
Maxine Peake, who's
Yeah.
a great actress.
I'm a
She
huge fan of
played.
Maxine Peake. I love her.
She's great. I actually just watched her in the new Inside Number Nine. But that's another podcast. But Inside Number Nine, she's just played quite a good part in that. And I think Shameless was maybe, and I might be wrong, one of her first sort of main roles where she became quite prominent.
Yeah, sure. The only thing I remember before that scene her in was it was called Dinner Ladies, I think.
Oh
I
God,
d
yeah, of course she was in that. Victoria Wood.
Yeah, Victoria Wood, yeah, and I just remember. I think that was like early to mid '90s that one, and I have a
Yeah,
vague recollection of her from that. But besides that, I don't know what else she was in before Shameless. But yeah, I think she really like came into her own during this season.
Yeah, cheers. We knew that 5 hours back. Fuck off.
yeah. So she played. I think the first time I was drawn to the show was when I saw her in the advert, and I think there's a scene in the first episode of the first series. I think when someone hits a bouncer, or James McAvoy hits a bouncer, and she's running down the street, and I think in the advert she's talking about the incident, and she says something like, "I nearly wet myself when you hit that bouncer," and then she goes, "Well, I did a bit," and I just thought, "What is this show? This is incredible."
Yeah, that's like one of the very first scenes in the entire show. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so I mean, it was quite. I think when it came out, I think one thing that made it quite appealing was or maybe not appealing, but different was the fact that everybody in it wasn't really a well-known actor. They all kind of came
Yeah,
into their own, didn't they? David Threlfall, who plays Frank, the alcoholic dad, he's a thespian. He's actually done a lot of Shakespeare, but you wouldn't know that by watching it
yeah.
because he's pissed half the time.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I've literally just before recording this, I was rewatching a DVD bonus part extra bit where he's doing an interview, and like just the way that he speaks, you can just tell, and it was bringing back all those memories. And when I first saw it, and all the interviews that I saw of him at the time, just he's so different from the character, and to be able to play such a hugely different character and be so iconic, because the Frank Gallagher character, especially at the time, was a really iconic character on TV.
Yeah, I mean the big old duffel coat and the scraggly hair, and I mean he played drunk perfectly. I don't think. I mean, I often wondered if he was actually pissed while doing it because
Yeah.
he was just incredible at doing that, and the relationships that he sort of carries in that show. He what was his Mrs. called in it? His Mrs. has run off, but isn't he like shagging the neighbour who's got agoraphobia?
Yeah, Karen. Or is
No,
it?
no,
No,
he's
Sheila.
shagging
Sheila.
her, isn't it? Sheila with agoraphobia. She can't leave the house because doesn't she go shopping with a VR headset on?
She does, yeah. I mean, that's groundbreaking in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it was just. I don't think you could define Shameless as one type of show because there was funny times and there was sad times where you actually you felt for these people, but then it was also dark, very dark in some episodes. But you do root for these people, and when they're hurt, you kind of feel for them, but also at the same time you're laughing at them and you're just thinking how ridiculous they are. It was a show with heart as much as it did kind of mock that social class of person.
Definitely, definitely. And that's one of the things that I always wonder is obviously we came from a similar-ish background to the Shameless cast and not the cast, the
Yeah.
characters, the Shameless characters, and so we view it a certain way. But I always wonder what other people in the country in all different areas and like different affluent kind of backgrounds, what they thought of the show, and the fact that it won a BAFTA, didn't it, for best drama, I think in 2005. Like, I suppose it
Yeah, I
kind of
think it
showed
did. I
that.
think the guy who created it, Paul Abbott, I believe, wrote it. I think he wrote it as like a basis of his life growing up. I don't know how
Yeah.
much of it's exaggerated, or obviously there was a lot in there that must have been exaggerated because nobody lives like that. But it
It's
was.
interesting you say that because he said in an interview once that in his house growing up, I think he said there was either 8 to 10 people living there, but at any given time there'd be about 20 people in there just because of all the people who would come round and stuff like that. And he said he lived in a
Yeah,
small house. I think it was in Oldham or Burnley or somewhere like that, so somewhere quite poor
yeah,
as well.
yeah. It was. I mean, it's that community, isn't it? I remember growing up, and we had neighbours around all the time. It wasn't quite to that extent, but the fact that Kevin and Veronica can just walk through the door, and they have parties, and it's. It
Not
was
just that,
just.
I
I
mean,
don't.
the opposite way around as well. The Gallagher's walking into Kevin Veronica's house in the middle of, let's say, bedroom activities, and just that openness, and that's just a real council estate vibe, if anything, because you won't be seeing that in the posh estates, I suppose.
Yeah. No, and the way that it each character had a very in-depth backstory. You'd got Lip, who was the teenage Lothario who was shagging Karen. Karen was the daughter of Sheila that we touched on earlier.
Yeah, she was the teenage temptress.
So there was that aspect of it, and then obviously there's Ian, who was like a closet homosexual. Every character had a very different backstory, so the series was able to go on for as long as it did because every sort of person in it was able to bring forward a new narrative for whatever they were going through at the time. So there was Ian, who was gay, and there was Lip, who was having sex with Karen, but Karen was also with Frank. I mean, there was just so many things you could write about.
Okay, so you said that you saw the adverts on TV. When was the first time you watched Shameless? Were you watching from episode 1, or did you catch on later on?
No, I think it had done quite a run of adverts before it came on the TV. It was kind of like Channel 4's flagship show, wasn't it?
Yeah,
for a
sure.
while. And it was a time before streaming and watching things online. It was, if you had to watch something, you was on your arse on that couch at 10 o'clock that night to watch it because there was no other way of watching it. It was before digital and all that. So it was kind of like, I think it was on a Tuesday, wasn't it? It was like a Tuesday night thing.
I think Tuesday or Thursdays rings a bell, yeah, something like that.
I was there every Tuesday watching it, and I watched it religiously up until about series 7, I think. I mean, this is probably a really unpopular opinion, but I think it lost something towards the end. The first 1 maybe to 4 series were just amazing, and then I think, didn't they build a studio, because it was all done on location, everything filmed in actual houses, and then when
they did change it over, yeah.
Started to churn it out, and it just became almost ridiculous. The neighbours, who we've not touched on yet, the Maguires, who were a fearsome Irish family. I can't remember who plays the father, but the mother was Tina Malone, wasn't it? The Scouse actress.
Yeah.
And she was a force to be reckoned with. She was actually quite terrifying in the first few series. And then, I don't know, the Maguires became somewhat of a joke towards the end. And I think I started to tune out once the Maguires became the joke, because I think they were needed in the first few series to drive that fear. They were quite scary, weren't they?
Oh, definitely 100%. And I don't think it's a controversial call at all. That I think a lot of people think that after the first few seasons, it did kind of go downhill a little bit and lost its allure. I mean, I was still a huge fan. I don't know what it is about me, but I'm kind of a completist when it comes to TV shows. I've got to watch it, so it's die end. And with Shameless, I completely stuck with it. And I suppose in the last season they did bring back some of the earlier characters, but yeah, it didn't. It wasn't as strong as it was in the first few seasons.
No, definitely not. But it was a perfect. I don't even know if you would call it a sitcom. It was a perfect show for the first 4, I believe. The new characters they introduced. One that springs to mind is Norma, the lesbian that rocks up with the mother when she comes back.
Yeah, I think that's the penultimate episode of the first season.
Oh really? Oh, I thought she came much later on, but
that's what I thought. Looking back, I thought that, but I watched season 1 in anticipation for this podcast, and I was quite surprised to see that Monica and Norma debuted the second to last episode when Frank's going through all the drama with the debt collectors.
It is funny. I mean, there's some of the insults that he would use, and something. I mean, going back a little bit, going back to Frank, who I've already said is this drunken, idiotic, feckless, irresponsible character, and then he's got these moments of sobriety that are quite rare when he talks complete sense, which makes it very, very funny.
I used to absolutely love his monologues and just absolutely loved them. Regardless of what they were, there's one he does about stone roses at Alexander Palace. There's Even the opening thing, and this is one thing I wanted to touch on, is the opening credits of Shameless. It's no like high end production. It's just like footage of them burning like stuff in the middle of like
Having a bonfire in the middle of the
having
council.
a bonfire in the middle of a council estate. Yeah, and then there's no real music to it. There's a slight beat, but then it's just Frank Gallagher saying like,
I
"And
think
I'm
I can probably
proud of
do.
them."
I think I can probably do that off, with like off the top of my head now, even though I've not seen it for years. And how did it start? Now nobody's saying the Chatsworth Estate is the Garden of Eden.
But it's been a good home to me, Frank Gallagher, and me
And me
kids,
kids.
who I'm proud of.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great opener in the sense that he introduced his entire family in the opening, so you already know what you're walking into from the opening credits.
Yep.
And Fiona, the eldest daughter, who's left with the responsibility of looking after the rest of them while he's pissed somewhere. And obviously Fiona meets Steve, played by the now very famous James McAvoy, who she meets in a club on a night out, and he was in the first two series, I believe, and I think after that he became quite big, didn't he? And went into didn't he appear in that Angelina Jolie film straight off the back of Shameless? Is it Wanted? The
I'm
bullet
not
bending.
sure where he got cast, but yeah, he definitely ended up getting too big for Shameless.
Yeah, and then the whole, I mean, doesn't he have to do a runner? He pisses off a gangster and he does a runner, and that's how they write him out.
Yeah, I think it's something to do with like a drug deal, and like I think he lost a car or something and it had like drugs in the tire or something, the spare tire, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was just such a diverse cast in a sense. You did have the boyfriend, James McAvoy, the family, who all had the different issues. Like I've already said,
Sure, yeah.
Ian was the gay one that didn't want anyone to know, and bringing in a new character now. Ian was actually with what was he? Was he called the guy who ran the shop?
Cash.
Cash, Devon Cash, who ran the shop. He was a Muslim guy married to, is it Yvonne?
Yvonne, yep.
The gobby woman who converted to Islam for him, but then she had no idea that he was having sex with an underage teenager. It was just bizarre.
I was slightly different to you. I mean, I was always sat on my ass watching the TV, so I don't know how I missed these adverts, but I never saw them. And the first time I heard about Shameless was actually people in school just talking about it. And it was always the kids that I wasn't really friends with, so I wasn't really paying too much attention to what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And it was only a while later when it was Kieran Litterick. Do you remember Kieran Litterick?
Yeah, I do.
And he got cast in it, didn't he, to like be like an extra in like the Christmas special, and they cut his scene or something. But it's when I heard that he was cast in that and he had a day off school to go film it. Then I thought, hey, I'm gonna give this a bash if he's in it. I'll pay a bit of attention because I liked Kieran, so I thought of support it and watch it.
There were quite a few people in it, wasn't there? That from school. Do you remember Rob Davis, who played one of the? I think he rocked up as one of the Maguire clan. I think
There was, yeah. Rob played one of the Maguires. Malachi Sims was in it in the background of one of the shots during when one of the MPs is being racist, I think. I'm not sure. There's probably loads that are in it.
Yeah, and it was filmed just down the road, wasn't it? I remember actually, I went to Salford Uni, and I ended up living on that estate.
Right, okay.
It really was exactly what the show made it out to be. I just remember getting fireworks thrown at me on 2 occasions.
Oh Christ!
It was like the Wild West. It was like lawless. I actually worked in a cash generator on the precinct when I wasn't at uni, just to make a bit of extra cash. And some of the sights that you would see, I mean, the inspiration is definitely there.
I can only imagine what you saw working in
The
that shop at that
The
time.
bargain booth was bulletproof. Next to the cash generator, there was a bargain booth, and I just remember going in, and you had to actually ask the person behind the glass to hand you the beer.
Wow.
It was triple glazed windows. I mean, it was an experience, to be sure. But they always say write about what you know, don't they? So it was clear to see how he got his inspiration for this shot, because these people actually exist.
Definitely, and the problems that all the Gallagher family had as well, like you said before, they were so diverse and it was so interesting. But that intro, like you said, they set the scene completely, don't they? When you hear the intro, but like the very first episode, watching it back this week was kind of a perfect introduction to all the characters. you have Lip and he's going around to help Karen with her own work, and then she's been the teenage temptress and she's climbing under the table and all that stuff. And he finds Ian's porno mags by accident, and Fiona's running around trying to look after everyone. And that scene that you mentioned with Maxine Peake, where she's like, "Well, I did a little." That's in that first episode. So she's the kind of cheeky next door neighbour. You kind of,
She was great, wasn't she? Do you remember
she
the
was.
scene when she's wiping the she's cleaning the windows and she's got her boobs pressed up against the glass while somebody runs and nicks milk bottles off the
off the
floor.
milkman, yeah.
And he walks off with a boner because he's been watching her clean the windows.
Yeah, just she had such great scenes, didn't she? And she was absolutely perfectly cast for the role. What did you think of the casting? Like,
well, I think I said earlier, I enjoyed that these weren't at the forefront of the entertainment industry when this show came out. I'd never seen any of them. I didn't know who. I think actually the only person that I did recognise was Lillian, who was obviously one of the extras in Peter Kay's Phoenix Nights.
right, okay.
Do you remember she was one of the regulars in the Phoenix? And then I think
I don't, to be honest with you.
yeah, Lillian. She starts off as a minimal character in the first few series, and then as the show sort of gets into its fourth, fifth series, she actually became quite a prominent character, and she
did. She runs
a pool, doesn't she, or something? She has like girls go into a house to work.
I always remember one scene of hers where like the police are phone tapping her, and she's like, "said No, we need to get some rice in, not some rice in." It's just so
because they think she's a terrorist.
yeah, and it's just so ridiculous, but I just loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I just loved all of Frank's little insults towards different people in it. So I think Norma, who I spoke about earlier, who was the mother's girlfriend, the big black girl that turns up, who lives in the Winnebago out back.
Yeah,
And she's quite masculine, isn't she? So he's calling her Shrek, and Lillian's got quite a distinct face. So what is it? Get your facts right, boss selector.
yeah, which is a perfect one, to be honest with you, wasn't it?
It was just a great cast, and as I was saying earlier, like it was good because these people weren't known. It's almost like we got to know them as the show went on. You know, it wasn't like I was watching a film and going, "Oh, that's Brad Pitt," or
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
That they were all brand new characters, and every one of them played their character perfectly, and you
know what?
believed in them.
There's one that I disagree on, and there's only one character, there's only one bit of casting in the entire thing that I disagreed with. I didn't notice it at the time, but the more I get older, the more I notice it, and it's Anne Marie Duff as Fiona.
Really?
Yeah, she's just too, not posh, but she's not Manchester enough for that character.
See, I think she pulled that off brilliantly. Because have you heard what she sounds like? Very well spoken. And she's another one of these thespians. You know, she's done quite a lot of Shakespeare and stuff, I believe.
Sure. Don't get me wrong, I think she played it well, but the accent wasn't there, and it took me out of it quite a lot of times rewatching it this week. It's just her voice it didn't have that right mank inflection. Maybe I'm just nitpicking because I know what it's supposed to sound like, but it just wasn't there, and it did take me out of it quite a lot of times. And that's the only person in the entire series that did that.
Yeah, I mean, I've not watched it for a while, but I never found it a problem. But then, obviously, when that show was out, even though Manchester's just down the road from Bolton, I'd never really been around Manx. Do you know, I didn't really know that many people. Like, going
Yeah,
up in
sure.
Bolton, you know, it was just down the road, but we never actually got there. But then I guess if I watched it now, I would be able to see what you see. I'm trying to think who else was in it. Obviously, there was, I think, what was he called? Carl. He grew up, didn't he? He was started off when he was just a kid, and then doesn't he turn into like this like sex machine come series 5? Because you actually watch these. That's the other thing about the show that I love. You actually watch these people grow up.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, Debbie started off, I think she must have been about 9 when the show came out, and then, you know, fast forward 5 series, and she's got some quite risque storylines, and it's not like they've recast. Nobody was recasting it, so you're actually watching these people grow up before you. You know, a new series comes out, and you know, a year goes by, and you actually see these people maturing, and not just in terms of aging either. Their acting abilities get so much more.
Definitely, 100%.
I'll never forget the Christmas special when don't they put, it's kind of like what we're going through now, really. When they put
I was going to say that, and for the conspiracy theorists out there, who say that this kind of thing is man-made and stuff, the Christmas special is very, very much similar to what's going on right now.
How does it? Isn't it like? God, what it's the meat, isn't it? Isn't it the military trying to do some kind of a course, but the tanks or the trucks that are transporting this contaminated meat gets jumped by some thugs on the estate, and then they start flogging it, all the turkeys and stuff for Christmas, and then it starts poisoning everyone.
Yeah, so yeah, it basically pretty much that the government, not the government, the army, they're trying to do some kind of a testing, and they're trying to make their recruits or whatever like solve the problem. So they've got all this contaminated meat, and then it breaks down, and Kev finds out that it's broken down. So Kevin Lip go and then they basically rob all the contaminated meat. Then they go sell it off in the jockey, and then everyone's poisoned basically on the estate.
The jockey. What was she called? The woman who worked behind the bar who had a thing for Karen.
Jez. I used to love Jez as a character. I think she was called Jez, and I used to love her as a character, but they never really did much with her, and then she just left.
Yeah, she didn't really explain that, did they?
I don't think they ever did, no. And like, she was an intriguing character because like they insinuate that she's a lesbian early doors in the show, but they never really go anywhere with it. But I kind of felt like maybe they had ideas for her, and then she ended up maybe
They
leaving.
kind of did, though. Do you not remember? Because she was always perving on Karen. Because I think she was actually a lesbian, wasn't she? And she was always after Karen.
She was, but I don't think she ever had their own like real storylines, though. Do you know what I mean? I don't think they ever built anything around her. They used her as like an excess piece in scenes.
Yeah, and I think that's where the show, in my opinion, a lot of people might disagree, went wrong, because it felt almost like the perfect ensemble when it started out. You got just enough characters and just enough storylines to keep the show going. And then I think come series 4, series 5, series 6, I kind of feel like the Maguire clan just expanded and there was no explanation as to who these people were, if that makes sense. Like, it almost felt like it got too big. They was introducing new characters, like Jamie, who became quite a prominent. I think he was a Maguire, wasn't he, Jamie, who ended up.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
But where was he? Like, there was no talk of him until like one of the later series, and then we're just meant to believe that this guy has always been there.
That was one of the messy things with the Maguires. Is like you mentioned before, Rob from school. He was one of the Maguires with a guy who I remember from Hollyoaks. I don't know his real life name, but a guy from Hollyoaks was like the main brother who had all the talking parts. And then like the next season, all those Maguires were kind of pushed to one side, and then we had all these new ones. We had Mickey Maguire, we had Jamie Maguire, we had the other one who was a bit more the unhinged psycho.
Because it was all about Mandy, wasn't it? Mandy was the one, the only.
It was, yeah.
And then fast forward a few series, you've got all these, Mickey who drove the pink. Mickey was gay, wasn't he? And he drove the pink limo.
He was. Well, he used to say it was first cheer, yeah. But yeah, I saw Mandy Maguire out actually in Chinese karaoke about a couple of years ago, and I'm such a Shameless geek. I wanted to go over and be like, "Oh, you're Mandy Maguire from Shameless," but I thought, no, chill out, Adam, don't bother doing it. And I didn't in the end, but I thought, like it was interesting to see her now because obviously I don't think she's really been in anything since maybe I think Hollyoaks or something like that, or Holby City.
No, I think that was probably her main and only part. I've never seen her around either.
Yeah, but I thought she was perfect in that role as well. Like we were talking about the casting a minute ago. I thought she was perfect for it. And Karen as well.
Yeah.
I thought Karen was absolutely brilliant in her role. And like another thing that I would have wanted to see more of is the dad. Karen's dad. He kind of he left home, didn't he?
It was Steve Pemberton who played the dad, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He's such a great actor. I like a lot of the stuff that he does. But yeah, they could have done a lot more with him. I'll never forget the first. And the other thing about it was such a boundary pushing show. I don't think I'd ever seen anything on TV that explored a teenager who's clearly underage being so, it's probably not the ideal word to use, but so slutty.
Yeah.
It really did push boundaries in terms of, I'd never seen on TV somebody before who was portrayed as, 15 or 16-year-old who was then, having sex with, she was going out with Lip, but then she's having sex with Frank on the side. And, she was quite provocative when she's getting on all fours and, she's flashing her knickers at you.
Definitely, they're really exploring that promiscuousness, which like they were kind of our age, weren't they? Not the people who played them, but like their characters were our age at the time because we were in our last year of school as well. And I think that was like a fair, accurate like demonstration of the kids that we went to school with, basically.
I just remember watching it and thinking, And it's bullshit now. But I remember watching it and thinking, is this what I should be doing at my age? Because obviously Karen was meant to be our age at around about the time the show was on.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm thinking, should I be? Should this be happening to me? Why don't? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I completely do. I completely do, and I think that's one of the ways that it kind of glamorized a certain lifestyle to me as a
Yeah.
kid, like
Didn't he
thinking,
go around? Lip used to go around, didn't he? And she would help him with his homework, but then she used to, because the mother was three sheets to the wind. She was agoraphobic. She was a bit nutty, and she was so blasé to everything. So she would literally be in the same room while her daughter would crawl under the table and give a blowjob to the person she was meant to be helping with his homework.
oh yeah, he was one helping her with the homework, but yeah, exactly, and it was just it was really interesting that they kind of went that route and took that route, and it was that realism that I think really attracted me to it. As a TV show. So that was one thing I was going to ask you is what was the appeal for you as a fan? What was the thing that really made you become a fan of this show? I'm guessing it's the same thing.
I just think it was one of a kind at the time, wasn't it? I think it broke a lot of boundaries. I think it was probably one of the only TV shows that I'd ever seen where they had pushed so many boundaries and they'd allowed a lot of things to happen on screen which I'd never seen before. It just felt very real and very gritty and very honest.
Yeah.
Which is what I loved about it, because there's TV shows out there where things are implied and things are insinuated, but you never actually see anything. And I think Shameless was one of the first things that I'd ever seen where things did happen and you knew exactly what was going on. And it didn't shy away from exploring underage sexual relationships. It didn't shy away from almost like the darker side of life. It kind of grabbed it by the balls and went with it.
Sure, and like even stuff like casual drug use, like can I have a pint and two E's, Jez, stuff like that. And
Yeah,
it just that became like a quote, didn't it? And like it became like not a catchphrase, but like everyone knew that saying, like kind of a pint and two E's.
which it's not something that we should applaud, but it's also something that unfortunately would be a thing.
Oh, definitely, and
It's
one of the things that I really applaud Shameless for, because a lot of TV shows are written by people who don't have experience in the things that they're writing about, which I kind of felt like when Paul Abbott created this series, that he really had experience in not all the things he was writing about, but like at least being around all these people that he's writing about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I think that appealed to me, and this is probably going to sound really cheesy. These people go through all these trials and tribulations. It's shit for them, it's good for them, it's never a perfect day, but at the heart of it all, it's just about family. And these people, as flawed and as sort of mental as they are, it's about family, and they all love each other and do anything for their family, regardless of whether they're drunk or they're high on drugs. It's just it has heart.
Definitely, and I think that's what made them so redeeming as a family, because like the scenes at the beginning of the Christmas episode, you literally see Lip and Ian go rob a Christmas tree from someone's garden, and then you go see Lip and Kev go rob all this meat from the back of an army truck, but you don't think badly of them, you don't look down on them for it, you think, oh, fantastic, they're doing this for the family, and it's great what they're doing, which in reality it's not. If someone came and robbed your Christmas tree, you'd be mortified and fuming, but like when you see Lip Gallagher do it, you're like, oh, it's alright, it's just Lip from Shameless, it's cool.
You kind of root for them.
Definitely, I think you definitely root for them, and I think the way they were all written and the way that it was acted was absolutely fantastic, and like going back to that first episode where Lip finds Ian's porno mags, and at the beginning he's quite homophobic towards him, but by the end of the episode they're back being brothers, and he's accepting him, and he basically accepts him, not straight away, but like it doesn't take him past an episode to accept him, and I think that was one of the huge factors into what made them so lovable as characters, was that regardless of what their preconceptions were, they would always kind of get on the right side.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it was also just one of those things where, like you say, he starts off being quite homophobic towards him, and it's quite awkward. And it was also a very realistic sort of how you would expect someone to react in that situation. It was
Definitely,
a brotherly sort of relationship.
Sure, they're both playing teenage boys as well. It's not like they're playing grown men, and it's grown men who are finding out this revelation. It's teenage boys, and teenage boys at the end of the day are idiots. So, and especially in that environment, you are going to get more of a visceral reaction to it. I remember the scene where he finds out that Ian's with I'm sure he's called Cash.
It is Cash who works in the corner shop.
Yeah, when he finds out, and he's like him, and there's certain racial undertones to it. I always felt, but like
Yeah,
it didn't stick. Like there was kind of that racial undertone just at the very beginning, and then they just moved past it straight away, and it got to that level of acceptance. And yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things that like even though it was things that I've not been through, watching that I could really appreciate those struggles. If you know what I mean.
yeah. Well, it was that first episode. I think it's the first episode when you realise that it's actually that Ian, which is the middle brother, is actually getting it off with Cash, who runs the shop, who's married
Yep.
again in a Muslim marriage with his wife Yvonne, who's a Caucasian woman. Have they got a kid at this point?
Yeah, I think they've already got at least, yeah, because one of the things she said is like, oh, you can't come home, but you can if you want to see the kids. That's the only thing you can come back to the house for. I think
Yeah.
that's what she said.
And I just remember that first episode and being sort of, what's the word? It was quite shocking. Do you know, because you know that they're at it and you know that they don't want anyone to know, but you don't understand when that whole scene plays out and Lips looks at them, how he clicks. And it's only when you realise that, are they wearing different shoes or something? Or they've been in a rush, they've tried to get ready and they've put the wrong shoes on.
Yeah, they've got like one of each shoe on each.
Yeah. And it never shied away from anything. It never, it used like racial slurs, but it used them well, if that's even a thing. It didn't.
Sure.
It was very self-aware, and I think there's a lot of things that would happen in there now where people would be up in arms about it, and they'd be like, "Oh, you can't say that." The world's gone mad with political correctness now, and I think Shameless was probably one of the last things that happened on TV before everyone started getting up their own arses about things.
I felt like it kind of rode the wave correctly, in my opinion. Like, I think that there were certain un-PC things that were said, but they were said for a reason and for like a positive outcome. Like they weren't said for like a negative outcome. They were said so that like when the outcome's done in the end, you can see that that person's then moved past what they've said before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the fact again that it did use quite a lot. I think it was great how they used. You've got the Caucasians of the street, and then you've got. I think putting a Muslim dynamic in there was a very sort of clever thing to do, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. Like again, that might be one of the other things that like intrigued me watching it, because like there's no kind of Muslim representation on TV that I can really remember when I was a kid, especially like a mixed marriage. That was something that you never really saw on TV, and to see that, besides East is East, which is like a caricature and was kind of done to take the piss out of it, there was no like realistic representation of it. So to see this, even though obviously it did have that extra twist on it, and then they built the gay marriage into it, it was still like a fair representation of that kind of background, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was different. I think there's so many things that I think Shameless was, it kind of brought new grounds. It was everything from the honesty of it, the dark side of it, the darkness of the relationships that these people have with each other, which all are very real relationships when you compare it to everyone else.
Sure, it kind of felt like Coronation Street, but if Coronation Street was real.
Yeah, it kind of ranked it up a little.
Yeah, because when you watch Coronation Street, everyone kind of plays, not a stereotype, but basically they do play a stereotype, don't they? Like, you have the one Asian family, then you have the one gay character, and then you have the one this, and it doesn't really break any ground. It just kind of touches on those topics and then leaves them alone, where Shameless was like, we're not just going to touch that subject, we're going to put it right in your face, and you're going to deal with this subject matter right now.
It definitely broke grounds, and I think it probably paved the way for a lot of things that we see now on the TV. Obviously, Shameless is quite relatable because I guess where we was brought up, the kind of things we experienced at school, and just like this world of characters where everyone, you can definitely pinpoint somebody that you know in your life who you can attribute some of their sort of personality traits to. I mean, for one, the character of Frank, for me, I found him as funny and as endearing as he was, and it was quite a hard trait to try and achieve, to make somebody like Frank, who is an irresponsible drunk, who talks nonsense, who has very, very rare moments of clarity when he's not having a drink. It must have been quite hard to make a character like that likable and endearing, and yet it's achieved. You like Frank. There's nothing likable about him, but you like him.
David, who played him, just did so well with that, and especially in the writing as well. He was perfectly cast, to touch back on the casting thing before. But you you bring up a good point about Falmouth. Like, even though we didn't come from the best place, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trade it. If I could go back and choose where we're from, I wouldn't change from Harper Green and from Falmouth.
Well, I mean, it is character building, isn't it? You know, I'm not for 1 minute knocking, you know, my upbringing, and I'm not knocking, you know, the place I was brought up. It definitely rounds you as a person. There's some people who have it all, and there's people who don't. And I think growing up around certain type, you know, you come to, and I don't want to say this and sound sanctimonious or, you know, cheesy, but you do come to accept people from all different walks of life. It's kind of like it's a community thing.
Definitely, definitely.
But yeah, as I was saying about Frank, he's not you know, on paper he's a nightmare, but you do find qualities about him that you like. You know, the little monologues he goes off on when he's not having a drink. I think there was one scene that springs to mind where I think social services are about to take somebody away and they've messed up, and he starts going on a rant about computers and data, and you know, a computer is only as smart as the person putting the data in it, and he goes on this massive sort of monologue about, you know, how you can have the best job in the world, but if you're not putting the right data into the computer, then the information is useless. And he brings a very good point to it. You know, he's this character who has nothing really. You know, he shirks his responsibilities as a father, but he always manages to sort of redeem himself and step up to the plate when it's needed of him.
Definitely, I remember that bit. It was like data, not information. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that, and like that. It's a really annoying thing and really well put together character, because we know people like that in our own lives who, like, they are a pisshead and they are a knobhead, but every now and then they get something right, and it really annoys you when they get one right on you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things about him that actually reminds me of my dad. My dad was an alcoholic, and
He was drunk half the time, and when he was drunk, I wouldn't even say he was a nightmare. He was just dozy as fuck, which I guess is how we can speak about Frank, because he's not an offensive person, and he's not, you know, he doesn't set out to hurt or harm anyone. He's just happy, like toddling around in his little world of drunkenness. As long as people leave him alone, he's happy, you know, walking down the street with a can of lager, and you know, he's happy as a pig in shit. He's not malicious. He doesn't set out to hurt anyone. He's just happy in his own little world. And I guess I can sort of see a lot of my dad in that, you know, alcoholics do just want to be left alone, don't they? They want the bottle and that's it, or the can. And a lot of his traits in the show actually did remind me a lot of my dad, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. You know, the character of Frank is really well written. He's on paper a nightmare, but he really does step up to the plate for his family when that's needed of him. And I think that can be said, like you said a minute ago, it can be said a lot about a lot of people. You know, people are flawed. And I think the writers got it so right with him, and they make no apologies for the character that he is. They don't for 1 minute tell you to like him, but you just find yourself liking him because of the things that he says and the things that he does when it's needed of him. Because he's a joke, isn't he? The character is a joke. And the thing that makes him likable is because you can absolutely relate to him, and you can relate to a lot of people who are like him.
That's it. He is a joke, but they kind of make him into a bit of an anti-hero, and I think that's like a really working class thing, to find these anti-heroes who, their character, it's not completely like Superman. It's not like a superhero you'd expect to have like a complete moral upstanding, you know, positive points all the time. But every now and then they will really come through, and I think that's one of the reasons why, especially working class people, really was attracted to the Frank Gallagher character, was that, yeah, he was a fuck up, but he was kind of our fuck up.
Yeah, definitely. And I wouldn't even say the show glamorizes what he is. You know, he is. I think it's said a lot of times, oh, he stinks of piss, oh, he's wet himself again. You know, they don't try and glamorize the fact that he is this person. They just let it play out, and how the viewer or how us see that person is exactly, it's our opinion. But you can't dislike him. You just can't dislike this person despite all the things that he is and all the things that he's capable of. You know, he's a shit dad, and he leaves his eldest to look after the rest of them. But you have to like him, and you have to laugh with him, and you have to laugh at him, and you know, ultimately, you don't want anything bad to happen to him. You know, there's episodes where he's on the run from gangsters, or you know, he's not getting his money from the social. He's no money, but you want him to find that money, and you want him to come through these hard times, even though you know that absolutely everything that he's going through is brought on by himself.
he'll basically be a shit person 99% of the time. That 1% of the time when he does come through, that's what keeps you wanting to keep ticking on with him and keep wanting him to succeed and let him find ways. Like when the debt collectors are looking for him in the first season, you want him to win. You want him to win. You don't want the collectors to beat him. And it's an interesting way that they've built his character and they've made him into such a kind of a lovable rogue
Yeah.
in that sense. But yeah, you are right. They do demonize him a lot in the series, and for the most part, they demonize him, saying that he's useless and he's not looking after his kids. And this is another thing that, like, when we were like 15 when this came out, Fiona was like supposed to be 21 and looking after all the kids. Now, when I was 15, 16 watching this, I was like, wow, she's so old, she's so mature.
Yeah.
Now I'm 31, I'm looking back going, it really hits home. Wow, okay, that's what this character really was. He was a guy who left his 21-year-old daughter to look after all the kids, and that was how much of a scumbag he was.
And there's other. I mean, each kid's got a different relationship with him as well, which I find quite interesting. You know, Lip knows what he is, so Lip doesn't have much to do with him, but he still loves him. The same with Ian. You know, none of them hate him, but I find the most interesting relationship in the series is that of Debbie, the daughter.
Yeah.
You know, she absolutely idolizes the ground that he walks on. And in her eyes, I think especially in the first series, it is the first series, isn't it, when he wakes up in France?
It is, yeah. I think that is such a brilliant episode, to be honest with you.
And the only reason that he knows how he got there is because he can smell the air freshener.
Yeah.
Oh, he got taken in because it was Fiona's boyfriend that dropped him off there to teach him a lesson. And like the relationship that he's got with Debbie, you know, she, like I said, she absolutely adores him, despite. It's almost like she doesn't fully understand what he is. You know, he's her dad, and it doesn't matter what he's done. You know, she doesn't he borrow money off her, and she willingly gives it to him. She's just there for him all the time.
Yeah, I think she made about 80 quid in that episode where she kidnaps the kid back. Well, not by accident. She kidnaps the kid, then they take it back, and then everyone gives her money. And 80 quid, obviously, to a kid is a ton, but then basically I think Frank Gallagher basically borrows it all off and never pays it back.
And she's happy to do that.
It's that realness that Shameless really touched on, that even though this guy is such a waste man, to use a modern term, the youngest especially just still adored him as that fatherly figure.
Yeah. And I think that can be said a lot about the world that we live in. You know, the kids, I know kids who absolutely idolise their parents, but, you know, to everyone else, we know that the parents are not necessarily that nice of a person.
Yeah, sure.
And so I just think the show as a whole really does get its relationships and its dynamics just 100% perfectly, especially in the first few series where we meet these characters and we kind of see them grow. And like I said earlier, we see them grow up. As I said, I wasn't a fan of the later series when it all became a little bit churned out. But the establishing sort of series and, you know, the few that followed it, the relationships were just bang on. And everybody, it doesn't matter, I just don't think anybody can look at that show and not relate to one person in it, or not at least relate to the dynamics or the relationships that are unfolding before you on the screen.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was having to think before, because I was going to ask you who you related to most, but I don't think there's any real one character in this show that is that relatable, and I think that's a real positive, because I think a lot of TV shows, they try and make all the characters relatable.
Yeah.
And they leave them being a bit too broad from that aspect. Whereas in Shameless, I don't think the characters were broad. I think they were all very specific characters. So even though you couldn't relate to them all, or they didn't really relate to you, you could relate to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you could understand what they were going through, and you could understand their motives, for a lack of a better term.
Yeah, and it was the comedy aspect. I mean, the way they use comedy to sort of make bring these situations out. I think it's a very, very fine line of comedy. You have to get the balance right, because it's not. Shameless isn't a comedy, but it's not a drama. You know, it's not a drama either. It gets the balance of the comedy and the drama so perfectly. Like, I think, you know.
There's a great example of that in the first season, and basically Monica's just turned back up and she's at Sheila's house, and they're arguing back and forth, and Monica's obviously left home. She's left all the kids with Frank, and now Frank's now with Sheila. Anyway, Monica returns. She's arguing with Sheila, and Sheila says, "Listen, you need to apologise." And Monica goes, "I don't need to apologise to Frank." And Sheila goes, "No, you need to apologise to them." And she points to the door. And Monica turns around and she sees all of the kids there, and it's this really serious moment of the mum seeing the kids for the first time in ages. And just as you're in the midst of this serious moment,
and that's what it does as well. You know, there are moments that you can laugh out loud at, and there are moments where you think that's ridiculous. But then, I think another example, which is quite similar to the one you just mentioned, would be the heartbreak that Yvonne goes through when she finds out that her husband is, you know, having sex with an underage boy. So it's not only that he's essentially a paedophile, it's all, and even though that paedophile's not really touched on, but, you know, in layman's terms, he is for what he's doing, because, you know, Ian's still at school. But it's the betrayal, and you really feel for Yvonne in that episode, because, you know, if you was to watch it at face value, it's funny, you know, always having it off with the shopkeeper, and but it's the relationships and the sort of how it unfolds, and how that, you know, if Yvonne is heartbroken, and it is quite a sad scene to see when she realizes that her world's just come crashing down around her, and it doesn't flinch away from things like that. It really does tackle heartache quite well, but it also gets the comedy right as well. You know, the episode where Frank disguises himself as a woman and he's running away from them gangsters. It's hilarious. It's laugh out loud, but then it can bring you back down to the ground in an instant when something really sad happens.
That's one of the beauties of the writing of this show. The way they did that, and the way they really did reflect reality in the fact that 1 minute it can be very, very serious and you can be in a really heartbreaking situation. And then the next moment, you can be in a just completely laughable one, in a comedic situation. Just things could like twist from moment to moment.
And it is such a dysfunctional sort of set of people as well, isn't it? You know, as the series go on, you meet people that could be very real in real life. And I think one of my favourite characters, I wouldn't say I can relate to him, but one of my favourite ever characters of that show was Marty.
Oh, well, there's a party, there's a Marty.
Well, it's the Veronica's brother, isn't he, with Tourette's?
Yeah.
With a penchant for arson.
Yeah, and he was one of those characters that you really felt sorry for, because, like, at the start when they debuted him, he was this guy who'd just been in prison for arson and all this stuff, and you was kind of like, who's this knobhead? But then after like the first couple episodes that you see him, and he starts to really grow into it, he becomes like a real soft touch kind of thing.
I mean, at the start, he's just this character. You almost feel like he's been placed there for comedic value, because, you know, he's got a tick and he's got the Tourette's, which, you know, we shouldn't laugh at. But what's his saying? Bucket Biff.
Yeah, I think that was one of his favourites.
Bucket Biff.
Spunk face.
It's just, it's just a great show about a community, but all these people are just so varied and so different, and they just work really well together. Shows can try and emulate Shameless, but I don't think anything will ever come close to being like it. It was a time of our lives as well, wasn't it? I think if it came out now and we was where we are now, you know, a little bit older with jobs, I don't think it would have as much of an impact as it did when we were kids and we could see these types. You know, it was the people we mixed with at school.
Definitely came around at the perfect time for us, and the perfect time of our lives as well, because we're teenagers as well. And when you're a teenager, you kind of do want that kind of rebellious show. You don't just want the middle of the road kind of stuff anymore. You kind of want to branch out to something a bit more risque, and I think that's what Shameless was. It wasn't just risque, but it was kind of perfect for us at that age. I mean, it was probably perfect for older people as well, because the older people was in those situations as well. But like we could really, really relate more to the kids at that time and what they were going through. And like you said before, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this what all the kids my age are doing? Am I missing out on something now? Is this like...
Am I meant to be getting a blowjob while I'm doing my homework? And I guess it was things like that. I used to think, am I slow here? Is there something wrong with me? But then obviously it's people do that. It just wasn't something that my life ever touched on.
It exists. It definitely exists, and I think that's one of the things that it really did like bring to light, is the excesses of life that are available, not just to the very rich. We always think that the very rich in life get the very best of the stuff, but these were a very poor estate, but they were managing to get excess.
And I think that's the other thing as well. Like, as I was saying, you know, we knew people at school that were 100% like that, and I think if we'd have tuned into that show if that show came out now and we tuned into it now, I don't think it would have as much of an impact on us as it did, because we were kind of living it. You know, we went to school for the day, and we did come across these people, and we did meet people who were, you know, very active sex lives at such a young age. What made you quite think, oh, you know, I've not got one, which I have no shame in saying I didn't at school. And I think out of that situation, it wouldn't have hit home as hard as it probably did when we were slap bang in the middle of it all. You know, you go to school, you meet these people, then you go home, and when you're at home, you're in your own little bubble. But these characters definitely existed. You know, I sat next to them in maths class or English,
Yeah, and I knew you sat next to in maths class as well.
Yeah, we should probably stop now, shouldn't we?
But yeah, like college as well, because not just school, because you're bang on with what the people we went to school with, but also college, because we went to college in Salford, which is basically not specifically where it's set, but it's a very similar kind of environment, and the place that we went to college as well, like that specific area, is a very
Yeah.
much Chatsworth Estate kind of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, God, definitely. Do you remember the height? I mean, I'm sure we can say we went to Pendleton College, can't we?
Oh yeah, definitely.
The height and all that, and yeah, absolutely. You know,
Do you remember when we first went to Pendleton College, there was graffiti all over the place and it all said Daz Faz is a grass. Do you remember that?
vaguely, not so much, but that
And
does
like,
ring a bell.
I literally, like, when we were starting college, I literally thought, like, wow, I'm going into Shameless right now. Like, and there's like signs on the wall saying Daz Faz is dead and all this stuff. I was like, this is the Chatsworth Estate where I'm going to college for the next 2 years. Okay, let's get used to it.
I loved college. It was such a good time. And the other thing was at school, not necessarily everyone at school wanted to be at school, whereas college, there were people that did. Everyone wanted to be there, otherwise they wouldn't have made that decision. But there were definitely some that were more rough around the edges than the other.
Oh, definitely. And I think that was all part of the experience, and I think one of the reasons why I love Shameless as much as I did, because it wasn't just relatable when I was in school, but it was more also relatable when I was in college. And like you say, if it was to come out now, because we're not in that environment anymore, it wouldn't be as relatable to us now. But the fact that we were in those environments at the time, I think it's what really makes this show really close to heart for me.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I don't think anything can come close to ever being like it. And I definitely don't think it would have the same impact if it was, but even if they remade it or they did a comeback series, I don't think it will ever be as groundbreaking or as hard hitting as that very first series, maybe series 2.
One of the other big things about Shameless at the time was the fact that you had to just sit there and watch it there, and then it wasn't like nowadays where you've got Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and BBC iPlayer and all these things where you can watch anything on demand and you can watch the entire series all in one. It was weekly episodic television, wasn't it? And like tune in every week to watch it, and then you don't really get that anymore, do you?
No, I really missed TV when it was like now that it's not like that. It was the same with a lot of things. There was things that you had to absolutely sit there and watch when it was on. I think Shameless used to play the second episode or the week after's episode on E4 straight after the first one.
It did, yeah.
Which, I think that was quite cool. Sometimes I used to not watch it the week it was on so that I could watch 2 episodes the week after. Because if
I didn't have that kind of discipline.
Well, I just wanted to. I always felt cheated if I'd watched it straight after. I felt greedy, so I enjoyed watching 2 at once.
Do you know what it is with me? I never liked to watch the same episode twice, but when it came to Shameless and it would have this week's episode on Channel 4 at, like, say, 9 o'clock and next week's at E4 at 10 o'clock, I'd watch them both every single week, even though when it came to this week's show, technically I watched it last week on E4. I just had to do it. It was such a revolutionary concept for me anyway, especially when it was weekly episodic television. Like, oh, and by the way, if you go to E4 right now, you can watch next week's episode a week early. I was like, what? Sign me up, especially for Shameless that I absolutely loved. It was crazy, but yeah, you kind of lose that, don't you? Like, we're talking off air about how you don't get that same feeling anymore of everyone goes home and watches a TV show and everyone comes back in work the next day or in school the next day and talks about it. And that's one thing I kind of feel like I missed a little bit in school, because I was a few episodes behind by the time I started watching it. Because everyone had been talking about it in school and I wasn't watching it, and I kind of feel like I missed out now. I kind of wish that I was.
Yeah, well, I just think it helped in a sense that if you knew where everyone was at that time, because you knew that everyone you knew watched it. Whereas now Netflix, that I was saying to you earlier, there was a show that I watched recently called The Stranger on Netflix, and somebody on the tube ruined it for me because they'd finished it and I was only up to ep 3. There was none of that.
That's the worst, isn't it?
Yeah, there was none of that when Shameless was on, and because it was just it was always a good storyline, and there was never a dull moment. You really waited for that Tuesday night. I'm sure it was a Tuesday it was on.
They used to do little teasers at the end of each episode, which typically, I don't like it when TV shows do that, when they give you like a teaser of what's going to be on next week's episode. But for some reason with Shameless, I absolutely ate it up, and I loved watching that teaser trailer at the end of like just a few little clips of what was going to be on next week. And I don't know if you remember this, but at the end of each episode, at the very end, the credits would run. They would have like a little bonus extra scene. Do you remember that? And I used to
Yeah.
always have to stay and watch that, even though for the most it had no consequence of the storyline. It's just a bonus scene. I had to always watch it.
It was a good little thing to add at the end, and it, like you say, it was just completely random. It would have nothing to do with the narrative. I think there was one. Do you remember the episode where Marty is sick of the dog barking, so he gets it an operation on its throat so it can't bark anymore?
Yes, I do.
Well, I think at the end of one of the episodes, he ends up like on one of these little bonus bits. I think he ends up killing the dog.
Oh, does he? Because I have a vague memory of him killing the dog, and I thought that's what you were going to ask me. Is that in the bonus scene?
I'm pretty sure it was because I don't think he killed it in the episode. I think it was implied because one minute this dog exists, and then the week after, it's just not there anymore. And unless you've seen that bonus extra, then you've no idea what's happened to this dog.
And that you've just kind of triggered something in my mind. When they brought in Marty's mum to the TV show, the first was like when they were talking about Veronica getting married, but like the next time Marty'd burned down a house. And do you remember why he burned down the house?
Wasn't he jealous of someone? He was jealous of someone having sex or something. Is that right?
Yeah. So basically, what it was is she was having sex with like someone who was like half her age, who was his best mate. And then, oh no, I'm conflating two stories here, but yeah, that's why it was. But then, like a few episodes later on, she ends up getting a golden shower off someone, and I think Marty or someone walks in on her.
He went to the bathroom on me.
That was it. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was such a like. Again, TV shows weren't really touching on this stuff, but again, people do that, and especially like in the older generations, I suppose they're a bit more sexually liberated and are willing to try more things as you get older. But yeah, that was something that they did on Shameless, which I thought was really funny at the time, and I thought that's not realistic. But as you get older, you realise, oh no, it really is realistic.
Oh God, the people you meet. I think with Shameless, there's definitely somebody that you can relate to. I mean, I could probably relate to somebody completely different when I was a kid. Who, if I watched it now, I'd relate to somebody else because we've got older. So it was a little bit of a surprise when America almost recreated the show, almost word for word, with obviously a different. I think it was William H. Macy that played Frank Gallagher.
Yeah, is it word for word all the way through? Because I've only seen like the first couple of episodes because I really wanted to watch it and I really did want to get into it because I love the English one so much. But
I don't think it was word for word, but I do remember being intrigued and trying to watch the first episode of the American series, and I just couldn't get into it. I don't think I watched past maybe half an hour because I think the story does sort of diverse as it gets further into the series. But I remember the first episode setting it up the exact same as the British one. I think even the kids were called the same things.
Yeah, I have a kind of a theory in my mind. I've not watched too far into it, and like it is quite critically acclaimed, isn't it, in America, the American series?
Yeah.
But I know with the American office and the English office, they did the same thing where the first season was exactly the same as the English first season, but after the first season, they then started to branch out and make their own storylines, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to get into the American version, was to kind of get like broaden my Shameless universe, and I could kind of link it to the British characters maybe with what the American characters end up doing. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe I'm just
No, it does. But as I was saying earlier, I just think it was what made Shameless so special was the fact that we did live on the doorstep of where it was filmed, and there was just all these characters that we absolutely 100% could relate to. And I think the American version wasn't relatable at all for me. I'm sure it probably is to a lot of Americans out there, but I think the English one was the one, like it was, as I said earlier, groundbreaking. I just don't think anything can top it.
I agree. When I watched the first, I think I maybe watched 2 or 3 episodes. I have a vague recollection of watching the American one, and yeah, it just was completely unrelatable for me because I remember one of the characters, she was working at like a baseball stadium or something, and I was just like, this just isn't. I'm not getting it. I'm not feeling it anymore because they have Americanized it, which I get it because it's for an American audience now, and hopefully they can enjoy it as much as we enjoyed the British one. But yeah, I just couldn't sink my teeth into it as much. But I do want to give it another chance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, God knows how long this whole virus thing is going to go on for. Maybe I will. I'll find
Yeah,
out.
that's true. Who knows? We probably end up having countless amount of time. But yeah, and it was very relatable to us. Like a mate of ours from college, Lee Abbott. They filmed one of the scenes in his house. I remember it's one of the scenes with Sheila where she's going mad, I think someone threw an egg on her face or something like that. I can't remember specifically. Or maybe they're throwing eggs at Frank.
Isn't that where they're throwing it at her house and she starts panicking because she thinks she's under attack?
Yeah, I think that might be the one. Yeah, and I think that was the one where they filmed it inside his house.
Something completely unrelated, but I've just remembered something about Sheila. Wasn't she like a massive nymphomaniac, and she used to have like massive dildos and stuff under her bed?
She was, yeah, and it's like a 180 from what you were like seeing her perceived as at the beginning, like where she would just be like very homely, very motherly, and then all of a sudden she's in the bedroom, she's in her lingerie, and she just pulls out like an 18-inch whopper, and you're like, what is going on here?
Well, she's an agoraphobic nervous wreck, isn't she? She goes shopping online with a VR headset because she can't leave her house. But then the minute you get her into a bedroom, she turns into like somewhat of a beast, and she's pulling out all sorts of stuff from under her bed and abusing people with them.
Yeah, which makes me kind of think, where did she even get that from in the first place? Because you couldn't really just order those online in those days, so...
I mean, maybe you could. I
Yes.
remember thinking like how much of a contrast, like you say, it was that this character who's very motherly and very, a nervous wreck and, quite a good person at heart. And then the minute you get her in the bedroom and she turns into this absolute monster with an array of toys under her bed. And, no one's escaping that room once she's handcuffed you to the to the bedboard.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. It was crazy, and yeah. Before we get off, I just want to mention the theme tune. I always thought the theme tune was like really interesting because it was all very, very toned down, and obviously the TV show's all about a poor estate and a poor family on the poor estate, and then the theme tune, it wasn't very overly done. It was all very stripped back, and it wasn't. It was like ba da ba da ba da ba da da da, but it wasn't instrumental. It was people's voices doing that, so it was as if they kind of mirrored it and was like, okay, we're going to have this like a low budget intro to kind of represent the kind of low budget feel of the show. And I feel like if it was too much overproduced, it would have kind of ruined it. And I think that's one of the things they did get spot on with the show is tonally, the way they produced it and the way they made it, the way they filmed it. It really, really fit.
Yeah, like the bare bones of it, wasn't it? It was just, it didn't ever try and be anything it wasn't. It was basically just, well, the whole series is just a story about a council estate family just trying to get by. But like I said, it has heart. And, it really didn't feel overproduced, which I think worked in its favour just because it didn't try to be anything that it wasn't. And that can be said for all the characters in it. None of them make any apologies for who they are. None of them are bothered that they're thieves or, prostitutes. And, everyone kind of just exists in this world where they are what they are. And if you don't like it, then it's tough.
That's a great point that they don't make any apologies because you're right. The characters, they would be stealing things and they would never have to really explain themselves to anyone. I mean, Veronica had to go at Kev in the Christmas episode for stealing the meat because that made everyone sick. But besides that, they never really had to explain it. It was just kind of like, oh, this is how it is. We live round here and this is what we have to do to survive. And you kind of respected them for that. Right, so I think we've come to the end of the episode. Damian, thank you very, very much for coming on. Everyone who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Please go and like and subscribe to the podcast. It's completely free. All we want to do is just give you something to listen to. So, Damian, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.